hands. He's still got Mackay, still got Mackay, still got Mackay, and Mackay goals.
Gibbons talking about selling candy and kicking a beauty.
What about this ball inside 50? Control from nowhere. Wasting no time, Jack News. Set shot. He strikes it beautifully. He's got it. The Blues win it. Jack News after the siren has won the game for Carlton. That is unbelievable.
Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian Brownie. I'm joined as always by my good mate Lockie Lydiard. And Lockie, now that the trade period is over, the busiest part of the year, we've brought in players, we've brought in all the coaches. The year's starting to wind down. I guess, are you happy with this almost kind of bit of a break now, or are you already missing the footy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we were due for a bit of a break. We've gone pretty hard this year on everything Carlton, but looking forward to seeing what we come away with in the draft. But already, of course, looking forward to next year so much, and can't wait for us to be able to get down to some open trainings, pre-season, and get back into it.
Yeah, big time. It's interesting. I think I was probably, if you asked me a week ago, I would have said, gee, I'm just happy. Trade period's done. Happy to relax. Already just doing this episode. I just can't wait for round one. I'm starting to miss it already. I'm missing having some news to talk about, but somehow we figured out how to get another episode to go. This might be our last one before we wrap things up for the year. We might do a little bit of a draft recap as well. But look, let's get into it. Let's go into a bit of a trade recap now. If you watched our guest appearance on the Blue Abroad show, you would have maybe already heard a bit of our views on this. But were you happy with the trade business we made? Obviously, Chera and Young come in. We got Hewitt as a free agent. SPS was the only player that went. What was your overall thoughts on the trade period?
Yeah, it's hard to be disappointed, to be honest. I think now reflecting on the entire draft period, my opinion is that we're the team that got the most better out of any of the teams in the league, in my opinion, putting it that way. Great grammar there. But I think with those three guys being added, I think our improvement is the most considerable, which is great. And yeah, the only real knock that some people might have is thinking that we paid overs. We've spoken about this so many times. I mean, to get the players that you know are going to be great, you gotta spend for them. So yeah, incredibly happy. How about you?
I'm the same. I think, touching on that, like Chera overpaying. In the end, it was like that future third that we got rid of, which if you'd asked me at the start of the period, I probably would have just said it's pick 6 and that's it. Then we started to get here. We're giving our second rounder. Maybe we're switching our second rounder to, in the end, just make it a future third that we gave up. I'm pretty happy with it. Most of those picks, who knows what they're going to be, particularly in this kind of draft year again, where these kids have had 2 years of just interrupted. We don't know what kind of football they're going to be playing. I'm pretty happy to cop that. And then, Lewis Young, we add to that, tall defensive stocks that we definitely needed. He's a Jones replacement, I guess. For a question for you, do you think he's going to be best 22 when he comes in immediately? And I think if he is, do you think that he's going to maybe play that third tall interceptor role? Or do you believe that he will come in and maybe play the lockdown and Jones will be that interceptor role?
It was great doing this exercise today of looking at our best 22s to get excited for the season. And it puts a lot of these things in perspective, where I think some fans are expecting him to be a walk-up starter, but not for me personally. I think just looking at how our backline is set up at the moment, we've kind of got 4 or 5 players that are locked in as our best guys, and then maybe 4 or 5 that are pushing to get into that backline, even before you talk about Young. So I definitely can see him playing a role next year, and definitely have high hopes for what he can develop into if he can still grow in his football ability. But he's not a walk up for me.
It'll be interesting because I'm probably the same as you. I haven't seen heaps of him beforehand, so it's hard for me to just go, oh, he's straight in. He's going to save our back line. We're going to be amazing. I think he will obviously have a role to play. It seems like they've been pretty high on him to bring him to the club.
Yeah.
The good thing is he is, I guess, that hopefully that next Jones replacement, being a little bit younger, but he's also had a couple of years in the system. So it's not like us drafting an 18-year-old as the Jones replacement, and then if he has to play round one, he's just not experienced enough, and maybe his body isn't big enough to handle the rigors of AFL. So I think it's a really good pickup. And if it doesn't come on, I don't think it's going to be end of the world either, giving up basically sort of pick 52 in the end, or SPS if you want to look at it that way as well. But I think fits the hole that we needed. Chera and Hewitt add to the midfield. I think you've got to be very happy with that. Probably my question I have for you, Lockie, is we're obviously both happy with the business, but do you think that there's still a hole that needs to be filled? Where do you sort of see the list, I guess, now going into the draft?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the thing that we've spoken about since we started doing this podcast. I'm still just kind of like a bit worried about ruck injuries. I think Young is good as maybe a real break in case of emergency if things go really, really downhill, and hoping that McDonald will be good to go. But yeah, for me, doing the best 22 today in preparation for this and looking at the entire list, I'm feeling pretty good about the holes being covered, and there's a lot of players who are trying to get into the best 22. So yeah, not really anyone that I'm looking to target specifically. What about you?
Yeah, I think with that sort of ruck as well, we lost Casbolt that almost was the sort of third ruckman, but we've brought in Young that can play that if we need to. But we probably still haven't replaced, I guess, Cruiser. And we sort of saw this year that there were injuries to Pito, there were injuries to TDK. So it still is probably a bit of an issue. Hopefully, fingers crossed, just fitness is okay and we won't have to rely on maybe a J-Sauce. But even then, he did okay. So it's an interesting one. I think, ruck is probably still a bit of an issue. I think I wanted a bit more of an experienced veteran on the list, break in case of emergency, to help teach the younger guys there. It didn't happen. But I think, going into the draft, I'm pretty happy with the squad. I think we've got depth in a lot of positions. It's now just trying to get the players, sort of the quality and the standard of them up, because I think that there's plenty of players there. So I guess, is there a position you would want us to target with the draft, or would you rather us just go best available? Because I guess alluding to obviously maybe those ruck stocks, it's hard to get an 18-year-old just to come straight in and be that player.
Exactly. And I liked what Austin said during the week when he said they're looking at that mid-forward group and wanting to improve the running capacity and ball use. Like, he made some great points, which I know you've kind of alluded to in the past, about so many unknowns in this draft. And like the fact that we're picking a pick 25, you never know that we might just pull this gem out. So I think it's kind of a best available case for me.
I'm probably the same. Again, I think we're agreeing on everything tonight, but I'd probably be hoping to get maybe like that sort of winger that maybe Austin was alluding to. It seems like when we were doing our best 22s that we'll release them at the end of this episode. I felt like the wing roles were really a hard one, where we were getting guys that they're either midfielders or halfbacks. They weren't just lockdown wing. And I think if you look at the top teams, particularly this season, particularly with Melbourne, they have and they play specific players in those wing roles that play them every single week. They don't tend to chop and change position. They play a full game there. And I don't feel like we have that. Maybe it's a Lockie O'Brien. He seems like really the only one, maybe a Jack Nunes as well. So I think, that outside run is probably where we need to go. It's interesting with the mid-forward comment, because I feel like that's all we have on this list. It's just a bunch of guys that play that position but haven't really locked it down. But I think you can always have someone else in there. I'm pretty happy to go with best available as well. Talking about the draft, it's probably one of the last things we'll touch on in this, because we've still got a lot to cover, is there's a bit of talk about us potentially moving up in the draft, maybe going back into the top 10. There was also the talk Nick Austin said about potentially moving back to bolster the picks for next year. What are you thinking? Would you prefer us to do one of those, just pick it at 25? Where are you looking to, I guess, do those soft wheeling and dealings with the draft picks?
We love some sneaky wheeling and dealing. I mean, leading up to this kind of period and leading into the trade period, I think I kind of mentioned on this show that I'm not really looking at anyone this year. The way the list is looking right now, us not going in with like a top 10 pick that we had wasn't really a concern. Like, getting an absolute gun in this draft just wasn't really a high priority for me. So if we did do that, trade back a bit to improve, that would be great. I mean, the comments from him seem to suggest that that's not something, I don't know, just how I read it, that it doesn't seem like that 25 is going anywhere. But look, let's have faith in the man. He did a great job last year and a great job this year as well. So I'm excited to see what happens on draft night, though.
He's definitely got a bit of an eye for talent. It was probably the big thing that was talked about him at the Doggies, and basically just that's what he does. He finds this talent out of nowhere, and I'm pretty happy, with Durden and Carroll that we got last year. But yeah, I think I wouldn't mind us potentially trading back. It's pretty much just a blanket throw on everyone past the top 10. You just don't know what kind of player you might get, and if maybe the players that we really wanted to get went early, I'm happy for us to trade back and try and bolster our picks. It probably depends what we end up getting. If we can get maybe a second rounder back, if we can get something for the futures, I'm always happy to bulking that up, because I think with COVID, it seems that we're starting to get back to normal life. Hopefully next season, the 18-year-olds, the 17-year-olds can play some consistent football, and hopefully the next crop is going to be that little bit better, and you can hopefully find some better gems in there. So yeah, I'm not too fussed if we end up trading back. I'd probably rather that than trading forward. But I'm happy for us to go 25 back in Nick Austin and get it done. So I guess with that, we talked about this in our sort of list analysis, trying to put our Nick Austin hats on and see what wheeling and dealing we could do. Now, this spot's obviously very hard to judge exactly at the moment, because we don't know if like a Kennedy's off the rookie list. They sort of haven't been 100% willing with the information to get this spot on. But I think at this stage, we might only be picking with pick 25, and the rest will be rookie upgrades and things like that. But let's just park that for a second and throw this up, because there is the delisted free agent. So I want to throw this out as a bit of more of a question, maybe in a bit of fantasy booking here, but with the delisted free agents, I'll put the list up here for the visual listeners on YouTube, but we will read them out for those listening on the podcast. But I guess, you have a bit of a think here, Lockie, if there's anyone you'd like us to target. I'll read out the names there. You got Charlie Constable, Jared Brander, who looks like he'll probably go to GWS at this stage. Hanrahan, you got Hartlett there. You've got Brandon Sire, you got Jack Loney, Trent Dumont, Cousins from Hawthorn, Stengel, and Big Watson from Freo, the very weird looking cat there. Is there anyone on that list that you like the look of that you'd like us to pick up?
My tune has changed a bit since pre-trade period, I think, where someone like Hartlett kind of interests me as like a more of a veteran presence. And then when I saw that Hanrahan wasn't getting a deal, I thought, maybe that's interesting. Maybe in a different environment, he'd go well. None of them are really exciting me at this stage. If there's, obviously, if there's a lift spot up for grabs, then there's potential that one of these guys gets it. But I can't even pick a name out of here. You wouldn't say anyone here is slotting into best 22. I almost wouldn't say anyone's best 30 here. So that's where I'm not as excited as maybe I could be.
I probably agree with you. Like, just to kind of go through them, I think Constable, we have so many of those kind of midfielders already. Yeah. I don't think we need another like inside mid. Brander, we were a bit interested in, but again, I didn't love it at the time when we were really linked. So I'm pretty happy for us to pass on that. Hanrahan, I don't rate personally. Hartlett's probably the best of the list. It's weird. I feel like he should be on an AFL list, but it doesn't look like he'll get there. But if you look at our list, we have so many of these halfback flankers. We probably don't need another one. Again, size, another mid that we have heaps of. There's probably like 4 that maybe interest me slightly. Is a Jack Loney type, being that small forward that has maybe got that bit of experience. But I'm just not sure if you've got your Corey Durdens, your Honeys, your Owies, kind of guys that maybe are that little bit younger that we're trying to develop. That I don't want to use like maybe the term list clogger, but I will. That maybe he's that kind of type where if you have him on the list, you're almost forced to play him and not develop people. Dumont's another that I think can maybe play a bit more outside that maybe we don't have. But again, if you're getting delisted by North, are you that good? And then the other 2, Stengel, I think would be a really interesting prospect. I think it looks like he might go to Geelong. Again, another one of those small forwards, but has had those off-field issues. And do we want to bring that in with the culture we're trying to create? And then I guess Watson being that sort of younger, tall defender, just to add to the stocks. But maybe because we've now got Lewis Young, it doesn't fit. So I'm probably like you. I just don't see there being a bona fide pick there that you go, yes, he'd suit all our needs. I think we've kind of got plenty of those sort of positions.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. Brander was the one prior to the trade period that I was like, ooh, when we got linked to him, I was like, okay, I could see how this could work. He's kind of like the Lewis Young type where I was thinking, all right, like it might not be a walk up round one, but maybe he could turn into something. But
Yeah.
now that he's linked, of course, doesn't look like that'll be the case. And yeah, the Jack Loney one's interesting because yeah, he could have a positive impact on the team, but like if Honey's getting dropped so that he can play, then I'm not
Yeah.
about it.
And if we're targeting these potential like mid forward, small forward types in the draft, you'd probably rather an 18-year-old over him anyway, just because of the ceiling factor. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to take a pass on all of those. So I guess with that and looking at the squad that we have and looking towards the big season next year, what do you think that I guess has to go right for us to play finals next year?
Wow, what a big question. Can we be healthy for one season?
Yes.
That's probably a big
Please.
one. I think we're due for some luck in that regard. So I think that's obviously an obvious thing to say for any team, but I think that's one. I mean, all the things that we've spoken about were our deficiencies this year, the defensive stuff. You feel like that's going to change. I don't know if everyone's as optimistic as me. It just feels like so much of our game plan is going to change this year with all these different coaches. I just don't think we're going to look like the same team in very many regards, which is what excites me so much.
I think I agree with you again, and it's interesting you touch on the injury front. I had to re-listen back to Sayer's intro into the John Nichols medal, and he was. Actually thought it was really good the way he did. We obviously made a lot of changes. We got rid of a lot of people, and I thought it was very respectful the way he brought up every single person that has moved on, thanked them for their service. And interesting enough, he did mention that the doctor has left, the main doctor. So maybe.
Oh no!
Not to throw him under the bus, but maybe we found out there was a bit of a problem there, and maybe he's the one that goes. Maybe it's not Jack Russell. Maybe the doctor was botching everything, and that's the reason that we're getting these injuries. So maybe that is a little bit of a positive to look forward to next year. You know, I love throwing out a random staff member. I think I threw the psychologist under the bus in the mid-season review at one stage. So we always love that. But I think looking at probably what needs to go right, you probably. If you want to go negative on this, I think it's so easy to, because I think a lot does need to go right if we are to make finals next season. Just judging off, I guess it's always hard to take your blue tinted glasses off when looking at Carlton.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're an opposition supporter, you're probably going, they've been garbage for years. They've had 2 seasons where they've kind of been competitive, still haven't been good enough. They've got all these fringe players. It's like Walsh, Wiedering, Cripper, Mackay, and then there's no one else. That's what the outside world are probably thinking of us. And we haven't really proven a lot. So a lot needs to go right. And I sort of maybe chucked a bit of a list here of things that I think if every single one of these go right, who knows? Maybe win the flag. But I think, you need your top players like Cripper, Martin, and Williams. They all need to get to their best. Because, we paid highly for 2 of those recruits. Cripper's been lacking for a few years. We need Charlie in the forward line to stay fit and get back to somewhat of the form he was in previously. We also have Cher and Hewitt, some big recruits that they need to come in. They need to settle well. We need a bit of improvement from these sort of question mark players, I like to call them, the Fisher, Dow, Fogarty, Setterfield, O'Brien, Cunningham, McGovern, all those sort of, they've been best 22. They've kind of been dropped at stages. If I guess the bulk of those can improve, we're going to be an amazing outfit. And then even just some natural progression from some guys a bit younger than that, like a Stocker, Kemp, Honey, and Durden as well. If a couple of those take another step, I think you're playing finals. And probably the other thing is we almost need Vossi to come in this game plan just to click straight away. And that's probably where I think I'm starting to get a little bit maybe pessimistic with things. I don't know how many times, I guess, a new coach has come in and straight away they've gone from team outside the 8 that's had some deficiencies to bam, they're playing great footy, they're in the 8. And I wonder if, and I know this is frustrating, but whether we might struggle to make finals this year because it does take time to really implement a game plan and get things firing. I know that's not what we want because we sort of are at that stage where we're desperate for finals and we need to do it. But I just think maybe realistically, and not to like dull the expectation, because I want the finals expectation. That's what we need to be fighting for. But I think realistically, like how How many times does that happen? I guess. Where are you sort of sitting with where you think, I guess, Vossi can come in and change things?
Well, it's great to bring it down to earth, definitely, because I'm reading through the predictions that I have, and lids are obviously off. So yeah, it's good to look at the other side. And yeah, I agree. I mean, they're all completely valid. And there's also, I'm not going to be able to list them off the top of my head, but sometimes a change of coach and game plan, it does just click straight away, which is, I guess,
Yeah.
I don't know why it just feels right, but it just feels right for us. But yeah, I mean, the list that you named, then, of all the things that need to go right, none of them are also, there's nothing ridiculous there. Like,
Yes.
everything is in play that all of those things could happen. And I guarantee that that's a top 8 side if we can look back on that list and go, is all these things worked? So yeah, wow. It'll be so interesting. I just cannot wait to see what this team looks like round 1, running out under this new game style. But you're right. And we need to be patient that if it doesn't click the first couple of weeks, it's not bring back bloody Bolton.
Please no. I don't think it'll go that way. And I agree with you. Like, I've been very optimistic about all the changes, very happy with everything we've done. And I do think the Voss is someone, and it seems like the leaders that we've brought into this football club and the assistant coaches, everyone, it makes sense. They fit a need, and I really do believe that they can turn things around. But obviously, it's just to what degree is that going to be in one season? So as the hardest thing, if this was a season ago, then you're going, yeah, they're primed for finals. They have a season to sort of consolidate and fix things. Then they're ready to go. But seeing kind of where we were at stages, like we lost to Gold Coast, we lost to North. We were losing to teams we shouldn't have, and we were playing 2 quarters of footy and winning some games of football. So I think that we had obviously all these issues with the defensive part of the game plan, and so many pundits were saying, oh, they fixed this and they're a final side. They're a 4-goal better team, and they think it's so easy to change over a preseason. So I think, obviously you can look at this so, negatively and look, oh, this has to go right. But like you said, I think so much of it can easily go right, and that we're not that far off finals. It's a couple more wins against the opposition that we probably should have beaten last year. And then it happens, and then we make finals. So obviously there is a lot that needs to go right, but I definitely see a lot of that happening. So I guess on that, we're going to do a bit of a sort of a list analysis now. We sort of did one post-trade. Now let's have a look at it all. So we will give our best 22s later on in this episode, but I wanted to sort of look at right now the best players in this squad. Who are the locks in our best 22? So I'll bring this slide up for those on the YouTube. So these are the best 22 locks, and I'll go through them. It is Liam Jones, Jacob Wiedering, Adam Sard, Zach Williams, Tom De Koning, Paddy Cripps, Sam Walsh, Adam Chera, George Hewitt, Sam Doherty, if he is able to play and he's back. He's obviously always back in our best 22 when he's at his best. You got Harry Mackay, you got Charlie Curnow, Jack Silvani, and Jack Martin. That's a lot of names I've thrown out there. But would you agree that those are most likely the sort of guys you would lock in all the time as being best 22?
Yep, I completely agree. The only name there is Jack Martin, where when I'm doing my best 22, I'm like, he so should be a lock.
Yeah.
But I just wonder whether if he doesn't take that step, he might not be there. But yeah, I like it.
No, I think that makes sense. He has been someone that's been that inconsistent. We're sort of calling for him to be dropped, I suppose, at some stage last year. But yeah, I think if you're probably doing it, your best 22, he's most likely in there. And I think his best should be best 22. And so I've kind of got this, I guess, next tier of guys, because if you're looking at this and you're trying to fill it, the idea is that we have almost too many locks for best 22, and you're trying to drop guys that you don't want to drop. And so I've kind of got this, I guess, second tier of players past that. So I'll get this up for you. So I guess you're looking at this second tier here, and we'll start off with like a Lockie Plowman that a lot of people like, a lot of people hate him. But again, he's not going to be that lock straight in there. You got Liam Stocker that is probably, again, more likely to be that into that lock in that best 22. I think both of us are probably going to have him in there, but he hasn't maybe proven it 100% and maybe locked down the position, which is maybe his his issue in a way. Like we're asking, is he a small forward? Is he a midfielder? Where does he fit? And it's going to be interesting with the new coach to see that. You got a Nick Newman who played really good football this season. Again, comes in that halfback, but I guess if we're playing a Stocker in there, if Zach Williams gets pushed back there, you can only play so many guys in defense. So it's going to be very interesting. You got Pitternet as well, who he started really well and then sort of dropped off a little bit, got those injuries.
Yeah.
But Pommy was on the other week and he was talking him up quite a lot. He got me very excited about the big Brad. So again, he's someone that definitely could be in there if we want to play the two ruckmen. You got Matt Kennedy, played an amazing season in that second half, but we've brought in a few midfielders. So is he again a best 22? You got Paddy Dow, who is he best 22 is a great question. He got dropped in the last game of the season, which was pretty stiff. Pretty much the only player dropped after that Port Adelaide loss. He's shown glimpses, but he hasn't nailed that spot. You got Ed Curnow, who is he now playing this small forward role? Is he playing the midfield? It's another interesting one. Jack Nunes, another where he pretty much played most games last season.
Yeah.
But a lot of people seem to be a little bit low on him. Again, we're adding a chair, we're adding a few guys. So does he start to get pushed out for some younger players? There's always question marks there. And McGovern, I think we've chatted about him so much on this show. He just has not been consistent. And then this is sort of a bit of this weird crop near the bottom where I think you can really argue that these guys are very close to it. But obviously there's reasons why they aren't. And it's sort of Zach Fisher, Lockie Fogarty, David Cunningham, Josh Honey, and Matty Owies, where they've all shown signs at times, but maybe Honey's the one that he's my man. And I thought he played really well at that second half of the season when he was given a chance, and maybe Owies as well. But they haven't, I guess, either played enough football to lock that position, or they've been a bit inconsistent. I guess, what do you make of that second tier? And are there guys there that you go, yes, I want them to be 100% nailed on best 22?
Yeah, well, like always, it's like we've prepared this list together because this is exactly who I would have in this next tier of the guys who I kind of almost wanted to pencil into the best 22, and there's just the little questions. Yeah, I agree with what you said about Plowman and Stocker and Newman. They're probably the three that I would comment on. I agree that they're kind of not in the locks because there's little question marks. But if any of those three aren't in our best 22, we are rolling out a very good 22 for me.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's that hard thing where they've been inconsistent at times, and because there's probably only so many spots that can be taken in those sort of mid-forward roles, and maybe if we're bringing another in the draft, it's going to be more competition. I'd probably have maybe Fisher above most of them there, but anyone can take it because, Cunningham before his injury was starting to play really good in the midfield, and who knows what the coach is going to do. There's obviously this big changing in standards that's coming through, and maybe that the talk has been, I guess, from the fans for some of these players is, do they try hard enough or are they putting in enough? And who knows, maybe Vossi comes in and says, ex-player, maybe it's a Zach Fisher, you're not running hard enough in training and you're not getting that spot, or he loves him and he finally gets that position for him, and instead of playing him small forward, he goes, you're the winger and you're locked in. So it's going to be all interesting. And I think that's probably where I'm on the positive side of all of this, where I'm going, there's so many questions and so many things that can go right, but I have so many answers for all of those. And there's so many different opportunities. You can play a Cunningham when he's back on the wing or half forward, and he can be the savior, or it's a Fisher, or it's a Fogarty, or it's an Ed Curnow playing lockdown. He kicked 4 goals late in the season. Like, there's just so many different options. And I think that for me is a positive.
Yeah, I think it's a great call out about Fish. I put him in a really similar category to Martin because in theory and like what we expect these guys to be, they're just so definitely best 22, and I love them both to death. But I'm just trying to be objective with what they've delivered on the field in recent times. And that's where I go, like, is there these other guys that would be in there over them? But if they're fulfilling our expectations, they're absolutely in there. So I'm with you.
Yeah. I guess looking at, comparing them that we've got on the screen here for our visual listeners is I've got sort of the best 22 locks there, and I've also got the second tier. When you're looking at the best 22, is there obviously there's some positions somewhat missing, but is there kind of like a style of player that you think is like missing? Is there a bit of a gap in the best 22 that you're hoping someone can take that role?
Yeah, well, the first thing my eyes are drawn to is probably the forward line, where
Yeah.
we look at we know who our tools are. We know that Mackay, Curnow, and Silvani is the future that we want. I've already talked about the question mark with Martin, and then there's just all the smaller type where we're like,
Yeah.
who are the pressure guys, who are the goal kickers, who's going to put their hand up, and yeah. Like you said, Honey's your man. We loved what Owies did this year. Fogarty was awesome at times. Fish, Cunningham, so many guys could do that, but it's like who's gonna put their hand up?
Yeah, I agree with that one. And I also think that probably the wing role is a hard one for me that I sort of alluded to earlier. I've sort of, maybe you can throw your Doherty and your Chera there for now, or your Zach Williams as well. But we just don't have that locked down sort of, he is our winger, 100%. That's all he plays. And I think that that's still, there's so many guys that can run through there, and there's so many different things you could throw. Like, does Fisher play there? Does Fogarty go there? Because he played quite a lot at some of the stoppages. He got in some of the center bounces. We saw Cunningham's explosion away from the contest at times. So can he be out there? And who knows? Maybe there, Vossi and this new coaching group come in, and there's a player that we never thought of playing in one of these positions that they've gone, why are they not playing him here? He is so clearly perfect for this role. And I think those are the exciting things. You've got finally someone coming in with fresh eyes. There is no assistant coach that's been there for 10 years going, no, he has to play here. This is what we think of him.
Yeah.
The possibilities are endless. So going on to this sort of third tier, and I kind of feel harsh calling them third tier because they're probably not that. Like, a lot of these guys I'll throw up now probably are closer to that second tier, but I've thrown them in this because I think that there's maybe reasons, and like maybe they're either coming back from injury, they've had some poor form recently, or we maybe just haven't seen enough. Like, they've only played 1 or 2 games. So that's why I've got them in this tier. So it's maybe a bit unfair. Feel free to yell at me in the comments if you want to on this one for some of these names. Because I think some of these I have close to my best 22 anyway. So I'll go through them. We got Lewis Young, who we haven't seen yet, so we don't know exactly what we're getting. Marchbank, obviously, with his injuries. Brody Kemp, I really like. I think he's close to best 22, but he's only played like a couple of games. Then you got Luke Parks, who played a little bit this season, but again, I think he's probably down the depth chart a little bit. Lockie O'Brien played a bit in the second half of the season, but there's so many question marks still on him. He got chucked back on the rookie list, so almost missed out on a list spot. You got Will Setterfield, who went from most improved to, we now don't know what we're doing with Setterfield. We still hopefully think that there's some upside in him, but we're not sure what we're getting. Corey Durden, again, someone I'm high on, but only played a couple of games at the end of the season. And then Willow, who was another like Setterfield. We had this promise for this season, and just for whatever reason, we weren't getting, I guess, the best out of him. And he maybe wasn't getting the best out of himself. So I guess, what are you making of this third tier? Are there guys that are screaming out to you of they're very close to being nailed on best 22?
When I was preparing my best 22, I slotted Kemp in straight away onto the interchange because I was like, this guy has to be best 22 right now.
Yeah.
But then I tried to take the approach of this is the side I'm putting out there to most likely get a win this week.
Yeah.
And for that, Kemp and Durden are just two guys we just haven't seen enough to know exactly what we're going to get on the day. But from this list, they would be my two that I think would be most likely to be locks at the end of this season. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting crop of players here. I'll just call out Setterfield as well because such an interesting, I think we were sitting here a year ago going that he's a lock. It's just funny how quickly these things can change.
And maybe so
Williamson
quickly
too, actually.
Yeah. And then maybe it can change so quickly back. Like, who knows? We're playing, I guess, Setterfield on the wing when no one thought he was a winger. You just never know what these new eyes think of some of these players. And maybe, as the old adage is, another preseason into one of these guys and they become a superstar. Because they are still, I guess, relatively young. They aren't hitting their 100% peak yet. They're not, 25, 26. So there is still hope for some of these guys. And I like what you said, Ari, sort of Kemp and Durden, where are they best 22 right now? Question mark. If you were to do a team that you wanted to be your best 22 come the end of the season to take us forward, both of those guys are nailed on in that of guys you're going, yes, they are in there, kind of like Stocker, maybe in that second tier where you're going, these are hopefully the future that can take us forward. So I guess with that, we now have, I'm going to throw to my question mark players because I think we can have a bit of a discussion on these guys. I talk
Yeah.
about them a lot, and basically there's question marks on them for different reasons. So for a couple of these, it is simply what is their best position? We think they're best 22 or close to it, but where do they fit into the squad? And then there's some others where you're just hoping they can maybe reach their potential that we maybe haven't seen so far. So I'll go through them one by one. We'll go through Liam Stocker. Where do you see maybe his best position, and do you think Vossi will play him as that defender, or do you think they'll throw him into the midfield now?
Man, it's so hard because I just keep going back to the finite amount of midfield time. I just don't see a world where Stocker gets. I think it's fair to say he'll get more midfield time next year than he did this year, which was basically no time at all. I think they'll at least experiment with it. But I just think the defender, and I think in the future he will be a midfielder. But I'm going to say that this year I think Vossi's going to play him very much primarily as a defender still.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. You sort of look at the midfielders that we have that I guess play his style, and it's Cripps, it's Hewitt, it's Kennedy, it's maybe an Ed Kerno. They're a bit more of that sort of inside, just grunt midfielder. And I'm not sort of selling him short because he's a good kick and he does have a bit of outside, but he's not that 100% outside, more like a Chera type player. So I think with the kind of depth we're starting to get in the midfield, which seems crazy because I didn't think we had it before the trade period. I do worry where he 100% fits, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he can play on the wing. Maybe he can find a role in there. But I think with what we kind of have, maybe for one more season, he'll probably play a bit more of that defender, that small sort of halfback that he did this year, because I kind of like the way he was playing there. He adds a bit of grunt to the defense, the way he
does.
He was doing that bump on Maynard and things like that. I just love what he brings to that defensive group. And, you know, a Brett Ratton was someone that started as a back pocket, you know, apprenticeship there for a few years, came into the midfield. Callum Mills is someone more recently that played a lot in the back line, now is a gun midfielder. So I think because of the build-up of these guys that we have, it makes sense to give him maybe just one more season as a defender. But I do agree with you. I think that he seems like a player that, as a coach, you'd absolutely love. And we saw him rarely in the midfield. I think in that maybe Melbourne game he played a little bit in there, and then we just never saw him again. So if I was to, you know, I am a betting man. If I was to put a bet on it, I'd say surely we see him more in the midfield this year. At least get a run through and just change things up a little bit. A plan B would be nice.
Yeah, I love looking at the midfield, even just as we were doing it and looking at Cripps, Hewitt, Chera, and Walsh. It's like those four. Well, they can't all be in the midfield at once. So there's already one that misses out on starting in the midfield there, and then there's just a whole list of other guys that are definitely best position midfield before you get to Stocker. So, but please get him through there. Make the fans happy.
Exactly. So maybe one of those that is above him in that midfield is a Paddy Dow. And I guess the question I sort of put in there is, we know his best position is that midfielder. We've brought in a few. We've seen the emergence of Kennedy last season. Do you think that he fits in that best 22? Do you think that there's a role for him now that, I guess, not to give too many spoilers to your best 22 coming at the end of this episode, but I know when I was trying to do mine, you'd sort of go through and you go through the locks that we just had, and then you try to get a bit of balance. And when I guess I'm looking for my bench, if you've maybe got Kennedy ahead of him, then you're going, well, do you have another just guy that plays midfield? Or do you then look to bring in like a Fisher Cunningham type that can maybe play a couple of different positions? Like, do you think that might be an issue of Dow getting a game now that we've brought in a Chera and a Hewitt?
It definitely could be. I won't spoil my best 22, like you said. They're definitely the reasons why he may not get a game, and we know that he may go through a cold patch or, you know, a bad time, and then there's all these guys pushing for his spot, like you said. But for me, if I'm looking at the list, especially this question mark list, I feel like I know this isn't everything, but invested a really high pick in him. We've spent these years developing him. It's been a bit of a bumpy ride. what he showed us in the second half of last season,
Yeah.
he's one of the guys for me that let's just keep developing. Don't give up on him. Give him that go. And then I think he should be best 22.
I agree. And I think that with just the way he plays, he's a little bit different. He's that exploding from stoppages like player that I don't think if you're looking at the kind of guys we have in there, he's different. He's different than them. And I think that that's a good thing when you're trying to get this midfield mix and seeing him with a bit more confidence, maybe a new coach, a bit more of a structured position and believing in him. I think hopefully, this season he can really dig in and be that best 22 player, become that midfielder we've drafted him to become. Next one is Zach Fisher. I guess the question, I think both of us would probably have him in our best 22s. I know we tend to be pretty high on Fish on this podcast, but the question kind of is maybe a bit more tailored towards that. What is his position? He started as a bit of a midfielder, played on the wing, half forward. They tried him as that small forward. Where do you, if you're Michael Voss right now, where would you love to play him and give him a role? Or do you see him as being someone that can just play a whole plethora of positions?
Well, this is why I don't like answering this question, because I think I do still think his best position is midfield, and there is no way that I'm playing him primarily in the midfield with the guys we have ahead of him.
Yeah.
So that's where it leads it in not a great position, because we talk, and everybody in the Carlton community talks about playing guys outside of their best position. Gibbons was a great example of that. And I guess that's one of my concerns is that, we have him best 22, but I think his best position is midfield. And I definitely have 5 guys ahead of him in the midfield. So that's why I think he will be playing forward.
Yeah, look, I think he probably fits that like outside midfield type a little bit better. I do like him as kind of that connector, I guess, in that sort of halfback wing sort of role. And I probably see him floating maybe between those two positions. So yeah, I'd almost abandon just the like small forward pocket role. I think you've got some talent now that can do that. I kind of agree with you. I don't see him being that just 100% midfielder. So I think that we can maybe finally give him a bit more of a specific role, and hopefully with a game plan that actually has roles in the team, it's this linking chain. And who knows, maybe he can be that winger that we needed. I think he can run. We've seen him have those spurts in the midfield. So I think maybe there is that tank there that can do it. He loves to chase. He loves to try to, get those chasing tackles going. So I think that maybe that can be a position for him. But yeah, I'm hoping we can finally give some of these guys some actual roles and we aren't asking these questions, I guess, at the end of the season. Next one is Fogarty. He sort of suffers from the same sort of things with, I guess, is he that midfielder? Is he wing? Is he half forward? I guess, where do you see him playing his best footy?
He's a tricky one. He might be my biggest question mark on that list. Because I do have him. Yeah, if you're going to do half tiers, I would probably have him a half tier below Fisher. So, we know that he can play he's good footy when he's around the ball.
Yeah.
He's just not going to be able to get around the ball that much. Like, he couldn't do it much last season, and you add Chera and Hewitt in there, make Cripps fully healthy, back to his best, like you said he's going to be. So, and then it just gets down to, okay, where is he going to fit into that forward line? We want that guy to put their hand up. I don't necessarily think it's going to be him this year for me.
He's a tough one. You sort of look at, I guess, those kind of half forward types, because again, I don't see him fitting into that midfield where he seemed to knuckle down and play his best sort of hard tackling football that we saw in those first couple of rounds. But if you start to look at him as that forward, he's not really a goal kicker. We sort of saw him struggle a few times to kind of make the distance from 50 and little kind of jokes like that were on the now infamous Gibber Fish podcast. So I think when you're looking at these other guys around there, like a Fisher, like maybe even a Cunningham, and even like a Jack Martin, throw him into this as these kind of mid-size half forwards. He's behind those for me just because of the goal kicking. And if we need guys to play those roles that can kick goals, I just don't think he can. He kind of looked nervous at stages to really take it on. Whereas those other guys, you see Fisher, you see Cunningham bursting through. They're the guy that's almost too selfish and they're going, nah, I'm kicking it. I don't care about, passing it off to my teammate. I'm going for the big sticks. And I think we
Yeah.
kind of need those players in the forward line. Maybe I'm wrong with that. And maybe we need like a more defensive forward in there to lay those tackles. But I don't know. I kind of feel like you can get that intensity out of a few of the other guys that can play that better offensive football. And maybe that's a better balance.
Yeah. And I remember before the start of last season, I didn't feel like he was going to be a best 22 player.
Yeah.
I named him round 1. How good were those first few games? He was
Yeah.
unbelievable. He was one of our best players. So you never know. He might just be able to, he's going to become a goal kicker. Who knows? Anything can happen.
And the club seemed high on him. They obviously gave him the high number as well. So maybe they're just seeing something that maybe we're not at this stage, and they carve out a role for him, and he plays really well like he did in those first couple of rounds. Next one, we've kind of chatted about him a bit. David Cunningham, he's obviously coming off that injury, which makes it a bit tougher if maybe a few of these guys nail down positions before him. Where do you see his best position? Because he almost played his best footy from those centre bounces. But again, he's probably down the pecking order a little bit, but is he, if he's going to be that outside type? I guess where are you seeing Cunners playing his best, and do you have him, I guess, above or below Fish and Fogarty?
Definitely above Fogarty. Maybe I'd probably put him pretty even with Fish. The injury is interesting, of course, but yeah, I still just see him as that midfielder, and those few outlier games that he's had in the midfield, we're just like, he's the guy. Like, how is he not getting more midfield time? And you're going to be asking yourself that a lot this year, because I just do not see how he really gets any run in the midfield with the quality of the guys we have there, even though we love Cunners. Yeah, I like what you were saying about those guys that just like put their head down and go for goals. Like, that's what we've been looking for, that guy for years.
Yeah.
Like, we know it's Eddie. Before Eddie Betts came back, we were looking for it. We know it was him. Now he's gone. We want those guys, like Matt always was like that. He just goes for the goals. We need forwards like that. And I just don't think that Fish or Cunningham are that for me.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I think with Cunningham, it's hard because he played that one game against Essendon, and then it was just like, oh, we found our gun midfielder. He got those mid-20 possessions in his first time really playing that role, and then we just never played him there again. And then it wasn't only till like the first few games of this season that we've gone, okay, we'll chuck him in there again. He starts to play okay, but we never really gave him that 4 or 5 game run. And then unfortunately he gets that injury, and who knows? It was interesting that Teague was like, oh, we're going to play him as on Jake Lever, and he's going to be the one that plays that defensive forward role. And you're just going, why is he the defensive forward? He's that exploding from the center bounce kind of guy. So yeah, it's hard. I think the injury is going to be his hardest thing to break into this team, because everyone else gets a bit of a head start. And unless, I guess, a lot of guys are struggling, he's going to maybe carve out a new role, because he's one of those kind of outside types, which we don't have a lot of. And I like what he brings. He seems to knuckle down and work pretty hard. And I don't know, is he one guy that can come onto the wing? Because that seems like a position we're lacking. And maybe he splits time with Chera on the wing, and those two are inside for a bit, then they go out on the wing. Maybe that's something we can do, a bit more rotating of those guys, because it seemed to be the same 4, 5, 6 guys that always attended the center bounces. Maybe we can change things up and be a little bit better. But yeah, I really hope he's best 22, because I kind of like what he brings at stages. But yeah, it's going to be tough. And who knows what kind of player we will be getting back. I guess the next one is Brody Kemp. Came in, played as that defender. Is that where you see him playing his best footy, kind of being that, I guess, kind of third intercept defender? Or would you like to see him maybe push higher up the ground?
I love the idea of that. I love the idea of the big intercept defender. And I feel like maybe I'm more lured to that because I'm like, all right, I don't know how many times we're going to say this in this episode, but how could he push into that midfield in the next year or two? It just seems crazy. It would mean that one of these guys like Hewitt is he going to push ahead of Hewitt? Definitely possible. But I think improbable, probably in the next year or so. So the intercept defender is interesting. Especially if, look, there's questions about someone like Plowman. Maybe he pushes himself ahead of Plowman by getting some of those different attributes.
He's an interesting guy. He can honestly play like so many different positions, and it's probably one of the good question marks is, I think I probably want to say right now, if I'm going to say anything definitive, it is go to the back line and really earn your spot and learn your craft down there, because whether it is that tall intercept, whether he ends up being that small defender that I guess you sort of alluded to, where people go, Plowman makes too many mistakes. And I think because Kemp is so agile, we saw what he did. I think it was that St. Kilda game where he did that turn and burst through the middle.
Oh,
we don't have a lot of players in, I guess, the back line that have that kind of class that can do those sort of things. So I think to have someone of his size down there, it's going to be interesting to see whether it's him, whether it's Lewis Young, whether they both play. But I think that he's someone that you just give him time down there, because that's probably just where your opportunity is gonna come from. We mentioned the midfield like 1,000 times. I'm almost sick of saying it myself. So I see him being that defender. I just think that is probably going to make sense. Next one is Lockie O'Brien. It's not necessarily a positional thing. We know his best position is on the wing. Do you see him breaking in under a new coach, or because he had a decent sort of end to the season, and he is probably our only, I guess, bona fide sort of winger on the list. Where do you see Lockie O'Brien's season coming?
It's a tough one. I mean, do you draw much from the we'll pick him back up, not offering him a deal and re-rookieing him?
I mean, at least he's on the list. I don't know how much you read into that. It's hard. It probably shows that they're not ridiculously high on him. But I guess how much is a new coach and a new coaching group going to change the opinion of that? Because the list managers have only seen so much, and they probably haven't seen a lot of good. And I guess if you bring in someone that gives those defined roles, I mean, his kicking is so good. We saw at our best. I think that St. Kilda game is in a tiny piece is just the perfect Carlton game plan. And the way he was just the silver service he was giving to Harry Mackay, no other player on our list can deliver that. And I don't know, we've been talking about like the deficiencies of him maybe being that tackling, and maybe he's only that good forward running, I guess, wingman. And who knows, maybe you can obviously improve in that and improve in the standards, but get a structure that someone else can cover his deficiencies. We're always talking about, this player needs to get better at all these things they're bad at, but we never seem to try and get a structure around everyone that goes, well, it doesn't matter that you're bad at that because we've fixed the structure and the systems, all just making sure that everyone plays to their strengths and we get the best out of people instead of worrying about what they can't do. So, I don't know if he's best 22.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think he, hopefully now that he's at least got this opportunity of being on the list, that maybe it sparks something in him, I suppose.
You make very, very good points there. But if I was a betting man, which I am, like you said, I don't see him being best 22 at any stage next year. I think there's just too many ahead.
I agree. I think unless he probably comes in, gets that opportunity, and just has 4 or 5 exceptional games instead of one game good, another just goes missing. I think he's at least he's I guess got that opportunity to prove it. But let us know with all these players, in what position do you see them in, and do you see them being best 22? We'll land on the last one here in Will Setterfield. Is he best 22? He played a really good season inside mid. He then ends up playing this halfback wing role, struggles, had some injury issues. We've talked about this midfield extensively. He's obviously down on a few of these guys. Do you see a world where Will Setterfield comes back and is that midfielder? Do you see him, playing above maybe a Dow and a Kennedy at some stage this season?
It's not impossible. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this new coaching team treats individual players, and if there is a different, whether there was biases under Teague, or obviously there was biases, but what biases there were and what's going to change. Again, if I'm a betting man, I'm putting him in the same category as O'Brien, but he's shown that he can be up there in our best, in honestly quite a different team to what we're going to be rolling out this year. But Yeah, man, it's a roller coaster. I mean, we're so high on Kennedy. We've spoken a lot about how we were very down on him 5 months ago. Yeah, just anything can happen. It shouldn't be super surprising if he starts round one and is one of our better players.
Yeah. I think his issue is just he lacks that versatility. He really can't play another position. And when we've got, I guess, so many guys ahead of him, maybe like a Dow, like a Kennedy, like a Hewitt, where you can't really chuck them in the forward line for a little bit. They almost, I don't want to be rude, but like they're a little bit one-dimensional in that they're just midfield. And I think they're good midfielders.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good thing that they can be those nailed on best 22 guys that run through there. But if there's too many guys ahead of him and, you throw in guys like maybe like a Jack Carroll that you maybe want to start to see a little bit out of him. Does he jump above Setterfield because he's never had the opportunity? I think it's going to be a really tough one for Setterfield to really break into the team. And I think at least with Lockie O'Brien, he has a role that no one's nailed that down. But I just think, the midfield's going to be tough, and I think that's going to be harsh. So I guess moving on from the question mark players, let's have a look at what this best 22 would look like with all the locks that we spoke about a little bit ago. So with that, the back line reads, there's two spots up for grabs basically in that back line, being the back pockets. We've got Liam Jones in there. We've got Zach Williams and Sard on the flanks. We've got Jacob Wiedering is the other key defender down there. To look at the forwards, much like the defense, there's two spare spots because we've got Silvani and Martin on the flanks. We got Charlie Curnow and Harry Mackay being the forwards. And then the midfield sort of reads, we got the two wingers there. I've thrown Doherty, if fit, on there, and Chera on the other wing. And the midfield is DeConning, Walsh, Hewitt, and Cripps. So I think you're probably going to agree with most of that and most of the positioning. If you don't, let me know. But I guess looking at that, are you pretty happy with most of the bulk of the squad that we have going into next season?
Yeah, well, if you saw my screen right now, you'd see it's all exactly the same so far. So I think the question on everyone's lips is, are we going to disagree on anything? That's the exciting part.
I'm excited. So if you are watching this on YouTube, you'll see that there's some wild colors going on this chart here, and you're going, what is he doing? Well, I'll show you this bit because I've basically tried to make it positional. So I've got some orange there being the defenders. I'm not going to go through the colors because you guys can see it. But I've tried to list the players that are vying for those positions. They're competing for it. So let's kind of go through it now. For the defenders, there's two spots left, plus obviously bench, and it's Plowman, Newman, Stocker, Young, Kemp, Marchbank. Probably the positive for me there is, say you give 2 or 3 spots, there's some good players missing out there. Would you sort of, I guess, agree
100%.
with that line of thinking?
Absolutely. Yep. You definitely feel good that if one of those guys has to miss a week because, Stocker gets someone in the guts a little bit too hard and gets a week, then you're good with the guys that are coming in for him.
Yeah, and then I think you start to look at the forward line, and it's probably not as good, but it's very similar because you've got a McGovern, Fisher, Ed Curnow I've thrown down there. You've got Cunningham, Fogarty, Honey, Owies, and Durden. There's a lot of guys that can go through there, and a lot are going to be stiff, which is probably, again, we've finally got this competition for spots that if, Honey comes in, if he's not kicking goals, and Owies comes in, or a Durden gets a chance, and while the negative of this is no one has nailed this down, no one has consistently been like, yes, I'm the small forward, I'm the half forward. There's options that if someone isn't performing, and hopefully we have a healthy list, there's opportunity for guys. And I think that's why I'm looking at this so positively. How are you seeing, I guess, the makeup of those that are getting these spots?
Yeah, I completely agree. This is trying to look at this positively and optimistically. It's pretty easy to do that because this is what I think is depth in all of these positions, except for the one over on the right hand side for those watching on YouTube. But that's it. I mean, if you're looking at this, I'm sure, and you show it to 10 different Carlton fans, they're probably all going to come up with a different best 22 because there's reasons why any guy on this screen right now could be in your best. I think you could make a case for anyone here. And
that's exactly right. That's why I'm so bullish on this. And the guy you were alluding to that we have no depth in is the ruck position with Peternet just sitting there on the right. But probably the hardest thing for me, as I think I mentioned earlier in this episode, was I packed out my midfield already. So I've only got bench spots really for it. And you look at the names, it's Kennedy, it's Dow, it's Ed Curnow, it's Jack Nunes. Now, most of those guys played a lot of footy this year. You got a Fisher that can go through there, a Cunningham, Fogarty, Setterfield, O'Brien. The competition for spots in that midfield is going to be ridiculous now. So I guess we'll jump to this right now. The guys that are locked, I believe you said were definitely in your best 22, and it's just those spots. Yep. Can you run me through? Let's start at the back line. Who are the two guys that have taken out your two on-field backline spots?
I love it. Well, yeah, the defense was the first thing that I had to lock in straight away, because for me, there's no way that it's not Plowman, and it has to be Stocker on the field starting the back line for mine.
Geez, we have definitely not disagreeing on this one. I've got the exact same. We're pro Plowman on this podcast, and I think that potentially for the rest of the season, there's a chance that other players go past him. But I think right now, if you're looking at your best lockdown small defender, if you're looking with hopefully a better midfield structure, a better defensive structure, we'll get better out of him. And I'm not nailed onto him right now going, yes, he must be in there week in, week out. I'm all for someone else taking his spot. But I saw this season when we didn't have him, that was just a gaping hole and no one could play on the best sort of on the best small forward. And I think even looking at that now with a Stocker, whether it's Newman, whether it's Brody Kemp, I'm not super confident really on any of those playing. If we're playing, Charlie Cameron next week, I'd take Plowman over pretty much all of those. And again, if you disagree, if you have someone that you think is going to be that, let us know in the comments or tweet at us or message us anywhere. But is that where you see Plowman's worth? Is just no one is really taking that spot so far?
100% agree. I mean, there is absolutely a world where someone passes him, even this season, with some growth from one of those players like you mentioned. Yeah, you're exactly right. You just have to watch our games closely and see what he actually does. And what you said is so true as well, like what you were saying about O'Brien. Like maybe this change in system is going to not expose him so much as it did, and it makes him the scapegoat for potentially some other errors. We know that sometimes he does a miss kick. Everybody does a miss kick. Stocker kicked one through the behind posts
through the goals, mate. He dobbed that one.
That's it. Exactly. He did dob it.
Beautiful.
But yeah, we love Plowman here, but we're also not going to cry if by the end of the season he's not best 22, because Stocker's the best lockdown defender in the game.
Yeah, look, I agree. So into your forward line positions, you've got pretty much two forward pockets. Now, if you want to, you can move some players around. I'm all for that. But who are your two forward positions?
This one was actually pretty easy for me too. I think he's your man, but I just have Honey as a walk-up starter on the field in the forward line. And I've got a prediction about him too coming at the end. And then the other one, I just have to have Fisher on the ground. I still, we know the potential's there, and give some speed, some crumbing, some left-footedness to that starting forward line.
Yeah, I'm very worried that we have the exact same team here.
Oh, no.
Because that's exactly what I've got.
We won't.
You know how high I am on Honey. I've spoken about it most weeks. And what he did, he showed that he could come in straight away. And not only was he kicking, a couple of goals every game, but he was passing them off and he was creating as well. And I think that he is a bit more of that mid-size as well. So he can obviously play that small forward role, but he can push up a little bit. And I just like that he seemed like that marking forward. He can do a couple of different things, and we love our versatility. And I think that he's definitely maybe over a Durden and always for me at this stage. Just because I think that I love everything about him basically. And then I'm the same on Fish. I think he is best 22 when he's playing his best football. And when you compare him to maybe the Cunningham and the Fogartys, I think he can offer that little bit more. And hopefully we can finally get the best out of him. So we kind of have, I guess, our 4 bench spots left when you look at this. I'm very interested to see how you go with it. And I guess I want to hear your explanation for why you've selected each player. So I guess maybe we'll go one by one. So give me your first bench spot that you got there.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the defense. The bloke that I think you could very easily make a case for should be starting on the ground in the defense. I think Nick Newman had an awesome season. He's mature. We know what he is. He's very consistent. We know what we're going to get from him. Yeah, I think he's just a great guy to come off the bench, and can do a number of different roles in our backline.
Yep. Well, at least we've finally got our first difference, because I've also gone defense
Nice.
here. And I think Nick Newman's the biggest snub that I have on this, just given what he
Okay.
did this season. But I've tried to look at, I guess, the makeup of this squad. And because I have a Stocker down there, I have a Williams, I have a Sard, I have a Doherty that can also switch and play that kind of rebounding, good user of the football player. I feel like I need something else down there. And I feel like Nick Newman maybe suffers from being very similar to a lot of those others. I'm not sure he can play that lockdown small role. I think he is a bit more of that dashing halfback. So unfortunately for him, brought in big Brody Kemp. So
Cool.
even though he maybe is a bit of a smoky, he hasn't played a lot of football, I just think that what he brings, being a bit taller, he can play small, he can play that intercept marker. I think that's what we need in this squad, is someone that can be that third tall, because I like Plowman playing that small position. And if it's probably between him and, I guess, Lewis Young playing those positions, I like maybe the mobility a bit more of Brody Kemp, seeing that spin just replay in my head every single time I think of him. I've given that to him, and maybe I think he can definitely argue against me and say that maybe he has not proven enough right now to be best 22, and maybe he's that thinking of yours of end of season he's best 22. But I think if I want to line up round one, he for me is someone I'd be excited to chuck in there. So I guess that's my pick. Who have you got for your next bench spot?
Yeah, well, I definitely can't rebut that one, because you've nailed what my rebuttal would be. And I will say that, yeah, I don't have him on my bench at all, but my fingers are crossed that he will be at the end of next season, because we love him. Next one, I'll go for one that hopefully you'll agree with me on. I've got Bam Bam on there, because I think that he's probably the next best midfielder that we have on our list. Like you've said, you could argue that maybe he's a bit similar to some of the other guys that we have. But for me, I think if we're wanting to put our best team on the park at the start of the season, he is in our best team. And he also has shown that he can go forward if required. So he's not one of those just completely one-dimensional guys.
Yeah, look, I agree. And I think I might have called him one-dimensional before, so apologies, because he actually is one of the few that can go forward and take grab. I think we started him full forward when we had no one later in the season as well. So, look, I agree. Kennedy's in my team. He's that next midfielder, like you said. And I think the fact that probably the biggest issue with our midfield is accumulators. And maybe what sets maybe him and Adele apart is his ability to rack up those 20-plus possessions every single time he played in that midfield. And that second half of the season was great. Adding him with Cripps, Walsh, and a Hewitt and a Chera, these are all guys that, you know, maybe Hewitt isn't that guy that gets those bulk possessions, but he allows everyone else to get more by putting on those blocks and getting the ball out to him. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think Kennedy is that next best midfielder, and I think he fits into that squad perfectly. So the last two are going to be very, very hard to get these, you know, I guess, positions, because I just want to throw up this graphic one last time, because if we're looking at the players still available, there's a lot of guys that are going to be missing out here. So I'm very interested to see, I guess, what structure you're going for. Who is your second last bench spot?
My assumption is you're not going to have this guy on your team, so I'll go with him now. I think we know what this guy's deficiencies are. Is he the oldest guy on the list? He might be. I think Ed Kerno is still best 22. The versatility is one thing. We know that he can go into the midfield and be reliable if we need be. We like what he has done in the forward line as well. He can kick some goals, can potentially be that shutdown guy in the forward line as well. Came 5th in the John Nichols medal. I think that has to be noted as well. Like, he was seen as one of the most consistent guys this year. I'm still having him in there. Played every game. We love Ed. They gave him another year as well. I think they wouldn't just give him another year for him not to be best 22 and to play him.
Surprisingly enough, I do have him in my best 22. He got my last bench spot. You'll see why he got my last bench spot when you get my next pick. But yeah, I think that if you're looking at other guys, and his spot kind of came down to, and maybe some spoilers on a few guys that'll miss out here, is I was sort of looking at maybe that midfielder or sort of forward kind of player. And the couple that missed out were, I guess, like a Paddy Dow, a David Cunningham, a Fogarty. Those kind of players, unfortunately for me, missed because I couldn't just go a straight midfielder. And so Paddy Dow missed for that one because I think we have enough guys that can go through there. And then it was sort of between Cunningham and Fogarty. And I think that right now, as it stands, Ed Kerno's got enough runs on the board. He showed, I think, later in the season that he can go forward and kick a few goals. And just, I think what he brings, with his tackling and that pressure in that forward line, Pommy's almost convinced me on this, where he was talking about how much we need these tackles in our forward line and having almost that defensive forward that can come in and sort of almost tag the halfback of the opposition. I think he can play a decent role throughout here, kick some goals, be a bit of a marking target, just add to the depth of this squad. I don't see him being best 22, maybe, 6-10 rounds in.
Same.
But I think right now, if we're playing a game, just what he can bring to this squad, I have him at the moment. But I'm hoping that maybe a Cunningham and these kind of guys can take over that role going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I absolutely agree. I'm looking forward to hearing who your last guy is then.
Because I've pretty much just wiped out half the roster that you probably have in there. So, yeah, okay, I'll take the reins here. I'll go with my last pick. I have taken the big Brad. I've taken the Pitternet in there. I've gone the second ruckman, surprisingly. It probably wouldn't be something I would have done if you asked me a couple of months ago, but seeing the way most teams play at this stage, and I think just how much the ruck was an issue all season, I kind of want to back him in and have him and DeConning be those two rucks. I'm almost leaning towards like Tom being a little bit more of a forward as well, playing that third tall, maybe the way Melbourne do that with Gawn and Jackson. I think it works really well. And if it can win a flag and we have DeConning that was a junior as a forward, we've made him this ruckman. I like the idea of having this really athletic ruckman that jumps and does all these amazing things, then having a bit of more that brute, that Pitternet, who at times went forward and took marks. He didn't really kick the goals, but I'm hoping that I just really worry looking at that team going, well, who is my second ruckman? And maybe that's the question I'll have for you if you don't have Brad in there, but I don't really want Mackay in there. I don't want Curnow in there because of his injuries. I don't want Wiedering in there. It's maybe Jones or Silvani, and I think Silvani worked at stages, but I don't know. I think the way that teams are going, they're playing this second ruckman. I like the idea of DeConning forward as well. So, yeah, I've given Brad my last spot. Who have you got as your last bench spot of your best 22?
Well, I like all the arguments you put there. And if I was a betting man, which I am, I think Pitt will be playing round one. I think all the things that you said there, I just feel like that's how they're going to go to start the season.
Yeah.
But for me, if I was the one putting this together, I wouldn't have him as on there, giving us the biggest chance of winning this game in our best 22 for me. To answer the follow-up question to that, I really do like the idea of Sauce continuing to grow in that role. I think we love what Sauce brings, and I think we love him as being that kind of link-up option a bit up the ground. We loved him as being a bit of an extra midfielder when he was doing that job. And I still think he can do all that by being the second ruckman, and let's put our faith in TDK. And also, I just think, the other point that you mentioned about Pitt going forward, occasionally took a mark, not really converting the goals. For me, us being a top 8 team next year, I think we can do better than that on our interchange, which is why I've gone with Paddy Dow.
That's fair.
As I think, I just feel like a player looking to take the next step under a different coach, new system, he's the kind of guy. Another guy that can go through the midfield. Maybe he'll show a bit more ability to go forward. We know that he can do that. It's not one of his strengths, but it's something that he can do. And I'm just putting my faith in Paddy Dow that this is going to be a breakout year for him, and that if we want to win this game, it's going to be him in there.
I think that was the hardest thing when I was doing this was Paddy Dow, someone that I was, crying out for last season to get into the best 22, and he's still someone that I want in there. But when I was trying to fill the spots, I couldn't put him over Kennedy, and I guess with that last spot when I wanted to go with the two rucks, because I worry about DeConning being able to ruck really by himself, and I think it was okay at stages, but I think he started to struggle quite a lot in that second half of the season. And yeah, look, I like JSOS being that fourth mid. He brings that tackle pressure around the stoppage. He fights for everything. And sometimes he almost plays his best footy as a midfielder. I thought he was starting to get a lot more of the ball. He was getting 20 possessions when he was in there. So maybe you're onto something. Maybe that's the way they should be doing it. But I felt we just needed that little bit more stability. And it annoys me because I want Dow in that team, and I'm not sure how to get him in there, which I think is probably, again, that most positive part where, I'm trying to get this list up of guys that I've almost missed out on, or we've kind of missed out together. It's like it's a Kemp or a Newman that miss out. It's maybe a Dow, a Cunningham misses, Fogarty misses, Owies, Durden isn't in there. You're even looking at more than that. You've got O'Brien, Marchbank, Young, Nunes misses, who
Nunes is
almost played every single game last year on the wing. So he's someone that misses out now. McGovern, Setterfield, Williamson, Parks, Cottrell, McDonald, even Boyd, if you want to throw him in there. There's so many players that are missing out that could come in and play a role. I guess on the snubs list, who are you kind of really annoyed that you couldn't fit in there?
Good question. I think, I got to give a shout out to Newnesy because since he's come to the club, he's been incredibly consistent. He's never been extraordinary except for that goal. But you know what you're going to get from him. So it feels like he should be thereabouts, and he will definitely play at stages this year, but probably not best. Oh, it's probably O'Brien for me as my number one because it's so hard not to look at that one game in isolation, but you just felt like that was his moment to kick forward. And like you said, he's got that role. Like he is the winger, but then it's like, well, if Walsh, Cripps and Hewitt is your starting midfield, well then Chera's got to be on there somewhere and Doherty's going to be somewhere. And then I just don't have him over those bench guys. So that's probably the one the most for me.
Yeah, I think, mine was probably Dow and then and Newman, but I guess beyond that, it's probably, similar to you, O'Brien and Nunes, just missing out on those, where Nunes, I think if you can give him a decent role, and I like that he can finally maybe get moved to a bit of depth, which I think is good for us. I think he's 28 or so years old, so he's got that experience that if we need to rotate the squad, if we get an injury, he can come in there and you know what you're getting, that 6, 7 out of 10 every week. And it's going to be so interesting to see how we line up round one. Obviously, a few of these might not be fit and whatnot, and some others will go in there. We've tried to do everyone fit. This is who's coming in there. So probably with that, if you were to right now have that best 22 and maybe Doherty is the one that maybe isn't ready to go, is it as simple for you as O'Brien takes his position? Is that what you'd be looking at?
Yeah, I think so. It'd probably be him or Newnesy.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. Like, I'd love maybe a Cunningham to take over that position. Obviously, if we're going fit, he's obviously not ready to go with that ACL. So, and I think everyone will get an opportunity at some stage, and whether that's because of VFL form, whether that's for whatever reason, I think finally these guys will get given chances, and it's just up to them to take it because we've got this depth now. And the competition is going to be ridiculous, which is, again, such a positive. Hopefully we can be looking at this at the end of the season and everyone's nailed on. And you've got these guys, you go, yes, we're not going, he's 22 because we think he can do something. He's 22 because of what he did this year, because he got 16 disposals every single week and kicked 3 goals. That's what we're looking forward to. So while we do look forward to the next season, I've got some questions for you on this, some hot takes, hopefully. I've got, I guess, sort of 3 here that can kind of get all intertwined into each other. So I guess, who do you think is going to thrive under Michael Voss? These new coaches, who do you think is just going to play out of their skin now that we've got this new coaching group?
Yeah, well, I think we've kind of touched similar question to this before, but it's just got to be Stocker for me as one to thrive. And I have to say, your man as well. I'm super high on what Honey can do this year in this forward line, and I'll put that in one of my bold predictions shortly. But they're the 2 for me that I think are going to take the biggest step with the new system.
Yeah, I've got Stocker on there as well. He's probably the most obvious one that every Carlton supporter is just super high on him, and playing that toughness and knowing what Michael Voss was as a player. I think that excites you a lot. I've got Jack Martin up there as someone that I'm hoping that this new change of coaching, Jack Martin at his best is this competitive beast that just, he sees the ball on the ground and it's not this, little scrap for it. He picks it up. It's his. I don't know what it is about him, but I just remember there's so many highlights from probably not last year, but the season before where you just do these crazy things that you're going, he is one of the best players on that field. And he's had some injury issues. He's had some consistency issues. I'm hoping that a new coach, new set of standards can really drive him to be the player that we hoped that we were getting. So he's someone, and I've also got Paddy Dow in there for pretty much similar reasons. Someone to really invest in him, give him that confidence, and he finally becomes, I guess, that sort of midfielder that we expected. Are there any other players that we maybe haven't touched on heaps that you're really excited to see next year, whether they're best 22 or whether it's just even just a glimpse of them at some stage?
Oh, I'm incredibly excited to see Chera, what he's going to bring. Oh man,
Yeah.
I need to temper my expectations a bit because I was too pumped for Sardi and Williams to come in last season, so I need to put the lid on. But yeah, it's just so exciting to see quality players like him and Hewitt come in and see how they mesh with all of our original guys.
Yeah, I have a couple. I think that someone on my list is Corey Durden. I've been super high on him for a while, so I'm pretty keen to see just exactly what he can actually bring to this to the football club. And I think the last couple of games that he did play, you saw little glimpses of him just pushing through guys and really trying to tackle and win the football. And he might take a little bit longer to develop than maybe we are hoping for, but I think he can really hit the ground running and be one of those nailed on small forwards that kicks goals, because I think he has the eye for it. He's quick. I like it. And then probably there's two guys that I'm really excited to see, maybe because of the injury issues that they've had. And those are Cunningham and Marchbank. You can sort of put them to the same category because of coming off the ACLs. And I'm excited to see what maybe a Cunningham can do with a coach that maybe gives him a position and says, yeah, you're a midfielder. That's what you're going to do. And then just to see Marchbank just play it all is all I'm excited for. Hopefully, fingers crossed, he can finally get an injury-free run and finally get a hit at it. Because if I was to say my, I guess, top 5 favorite players like 2 years ago, he was in there. I don't know why. I just loved everything about his intercept marking. Thought he was going to be a superstar, and I hope we get to see a bit of that. So probably the last thing that we will touch on is our way too early predictions for the 2022 season. Hit me with something crazy, Lockie.
I don't know if mine are actually that crazy. I'm just kind of looking optimistically at what is going to happen. I mean, I'll start off with I do really think we're going to make top 8 this year. And I don't have this stat on hand, but I think we're going to have more wins than losses. And I don't know when the last time we did that was, but I think that's what we're going to do this year.
No, I like that. Can you give me a number of how many you think we'll get?
Yeah, give me 13 and 11. The bare minimum to go over the threshold. I think we can do it.
Mate, if we get 13, the Hutto bloody commentary will be coming out when that happens in the episode. I tell you what, we'll be up and about. We're playing finals footy. So that isn't one of my predictions, but I definitely have us playing finals next year. So I think said almost word for word mine when I said players that I think are going to play well under Vossi is that Paddy Dow becomes the midfielder he was drafted to become. That is my prediction. It's been poised. He was almost poised last season. We didn't have him in our players to watch because we thought it was super obvious. Didn't have that season. Yeah. I've got him hopefully nailed down as finally becoming that player.
I like it. I'll go slightly bolder. I absolutely nailed this prediction last season with the 3 All-Australians. Give me 4 this year.
Oof, he's going 4. Name them. I'm writing them down.
Tough to do. Well, the 3 guys I think are going to repeat. And this could be controversial, but I just think that Cripps is going to get back to that level this season.
Cripper, he finally gets it. And sorry, unfortunately, Wiedering was snubbed again.
Oh,
so I'm assuming he was your third. He almost should be because you just imagine that he was, because he was so good and by far the best, key defender in the AFL. How he was snubbed again, I still do not understand what these selectors are doing or what games they watch, because for him to be that good our backline and the ball coming in there that often, no one else could have done that job. But I like those 4.
You're gonna have to edit that cockiness that I delivered with that. It just feels so wrong to say that he did not make it. Yeah,
We'll
can
be
you dub
finding
over that and make it sound like I said two?
we'll be finding a Taylor somewhere and getting him like a bootleg all Australian bloody blazer for those couple of seasons, because he definitely should have had it. I'm gonna go a very similar one to, I guess, what I just did, but Zach Williams proves all the doubters wrong. He comes in,
Love it.
whether it's halfback, whether it's pinch hitting in the midfield, whether it's playing midfield, it looks like he is a lot fitter than I think I've ever seen him. I've seen some photos on his Instagram, and he looks pretty good, to be honest. So I'm hoping that a good preseason, finally get this tank in him, new standards, new culture. Michael Voss just absolutely throttling him if he isn't fit, if he comes back fat. So yeah, I'm pretty high and bullish on Zach Williams, hopefully.
Yeah, me too. I think he's absolutely due for a good one. This might be the boldest one. You had a similar prediction to this one last season, so I'm excited to deliver it. Our second leading goal scorer. It's obviously going to be Harry. He's going to take out the Coleman again.
Yeah,
no doubt
easy.
in my mind.
Lock it in.
But I'm putting my faith in Honey to be our second leading goal kicker. From what we've seen of him, I think he's going to take it to the next level. It's going to be ultra consistent. He's going to be the pinnacle of health. He's going to be, I'm not going to put a number on it, but I'll lock him in for second leading goal scorer.
Look, it's probably the smart thing to do instead of picking someone that had not even played a game of AFL football yet, like I did with, I think I had Corey Durden as being the second leading goal kicker last season. That didn't end up happening. In fairness, I think if he played every single game, he would have done it maybe, but he only got the 2 or so at the end of the season. So I'll blame Teague for that one. But yeah, I think that's a good one. I like it. We need goals from somewhere. Obviously, Eddie Betts is out of the club, so someone needs to take over the mantle. Why can't it be Big Joshy Honey? Look, I've gone a little bit similar in, I guess, going for the younger players. So I've gone, and maybe this isn't too bold, but I've gone that I guess Kemp and Durden will be definitely locked in our best 22 come season's end as being quite vital players for us. So maybe I've gone high on Durden again, but I think that those two, they're questionable whether they're best 22, and I'm hoping by sort of the mid-season that you're going, these guys are the superstars that are taking us forward. And when we do our best 22 at the end of that season, looking towards the 23 season, that they're in our locked.
Yeah, I love it. I had them down as players to make impact. I think they will do that. And I promise everybody listening that my predictions will get bolder as we get closer to the start of the season. I feel like I'm just looking at the things that I'm hopeful and very optimistic for. But my last one, I think we're going to break the drought, and I think we're going to get a W in round 1. And we're all going to be at the game together. We're all going to be able to bond. And it's going to be beautiful. Break the drought and beat the Tigers.
I love that. Look, I'm all about that. I didn't have any other predictions, so I'm happy to piggyback onto that one and say we're finally beating the Tigers. What a better way to strike. There's all this hype again on us. Not as much hype on Richmond. I think that we've probably gotten close the last couple of years, faded late. There'll be no more of that under Michael Voss, and we will get it done. But look, is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Because this may potentially be our last episode of the season. I'm not too sure if we will do a draft analysis, because to be frank, we don't know a lot of the draft crop. So it might just be an episode of us saying, what a great pick. We got this half forward. He's going to be an absolute superstar. So I guess unless we maybe bring in a guest that knows a bit more on these youngsters than we do, this might be our last one. So is there anything else you want to touch on talking about the club as a whole before we start to hype up, I guess, the season next year?
Yeah, no, nothing really else from me. Just that I think all fans should be incredibly optimistic of where we're at. I think we've had a great off-season so far. And just get excited. I hope that we're helping instill some faith in everybody that it's going to be a great year and we're going to take that leap.
I guess this probably sums up the perfect time for this question. I just got one from one of the fans here that sent one in. Mickey C's has gone, is this another false dawn? He's sort of trying to say that, is this another time that I guess we're pretty optimistic. There's some that maybe are a little bit pessimistic. They don't want to buy in completely. We've been very positive on this. We've given a couple of reasons. You, I guess, right then and there were saying, don't be negative, buy in. Do you have, I guess, some reasons on why you are so confident to give these people a message on why we should be pumped and excited for this season? Because I think we've been here almost every single year going, next year will be our year. Why are you so optimistic, I guess, after everything that has gone on with this football club over the past, God knows how many years?
Well, I suppose the two things I would say is, firstly, listen back to this episode and watch it on YouTube if you listen to it, and just see all the reasons why we're so high on this list and why we're higher on a list than we have been since you and I were children, probably. We're just rolling out the best list of players that we have in such a long time. And the second thing that I would say is, if you're going into this season with pessimism and you're not excited, then I just don't see where the fun that is in being a footy fan and in being a bagger. So I think if you're someone like that, put your faith in the club. Like, we know that, it hasn't always been pretty, and they haven't always been able to deliver what we wanted. But just keep the faith, and they'll deliver.
Yeah, I think we're going to be here regardless. So why not get a bit of optimism? Try to feel happy before the season starts, because who knows? It could be miserable, and I'm going to get miserable when I have to be. I'm going to try and be happy to start with. And then if they can prove me wrong and it's another false dawn, so be it. We can find another way to cheer ourselves up. But I'm pretty bullish. I think we've got some depth finally. I love the spine. It is the best. We just need a few more of these players to start to stand up. I think the culture, and it feels like there's a bit of a culture shift. We finally gutted everything, it seems. New president that, I mean, just look at the way we did the best and fairest. It was an actual telecasted thing in a lovely studio. All the players were there. We got a Dylan Buckley cameo. They understood, I guess, what the new generation of fans are listening to and who they want to see. And getting around some former baggers, I just think that there's this unity at the club with everything that's happened with Doherty and the way that every single player shaved their head and have got around it. The staff have been doing it as well. Austin, Lloyd, Sayers, everyone seemed to be doing it. And I just feel like for once, I think back to last season and there was this optimism, but it just didn't feel like this. It didn't feel like everything seemed to be going right with the club. And we've got Brian Cook in, we got Vossi. Why not? Get on board. Again, worst case, we'll be miserable halfway through the season. Don't be miserable now. Get excited. But look, that's going to wrap things up. Thanks for being a part of this for this season. We're very keen to be doing more next season as well. We'll be here every single week. Get around the baggers. See you guys next time.